The materials used in making a standard table knife are the metal for the blade, bolster and tang, and a range of natural and synthetic materials for the handle and decorative additions. The materials used for the knife blade have been determined over time by its function, that is, what it was used for, as well as by the availability of materials and the cost associated with producing and using those materials. In early times they were made from stone or flint, then copper and bronze, followed by iron, and finally a variety of steels. If a knife is to be used for cutting, the material must be able to be sharpened to produce an edge. Copper, although soft, was easier to resharpen than stone. The use of bronze, cast in a mould and then hammered or smithed, gave a much stronger blade. But the Cutlass Company laid down in 1624 that cutting edges must be of steel, which had the qualities necessary to produce such an edge, but as it needed more treatment, was more expensive than using iron. Steel is a combination of iron and various amounts of carbon. The addition of other metals changes the properties of the steel, making it suitable for different uses, as shown in the table. The amount of carbon is critical in giving steel its strength without making it too brittle. Developments in steel manufacture have aimed to produce quantities of consistently good quality metal, and it was these developments which dictated the use of different types of steel for table knife blades. Early production of steel was achieved by layering iron bars with charcoal, heated for several days in a cementation furnace. This gave a product called blister steel, which was forged by heating and hammering into bars of shear steel. In 1740, Benjamin Huntsman invented a method of making liquid steel in a crucible pot, which was then cast in moulds. This was of much better quality, but could only be produced in relatively small amounts. Bulk production of steel came with the invention of the Bessemer converter. In 1856, Henry Bessemer, working independently in Sheffield, developed and patented the process where hot air is blown through molten iron to remove impurities. Bessemer steel was not of as high a quality as crucible steel, but could be produced in larger quantities. The Siemens open hearth method in 1865, then the electric arc method to produce bulk steel followed in the early 1900s. But it wasn't until the discovery of rustless or stainless steel by Harry Brearley in 1913 that the material used for table knife blades changed. This new steel did not rust or stain, but was criticised as it didn't retain a sharp edge as well as shear steel. This led to the innovation of blades with serrated and scalloped edges. The relative cost of steel to iron meant that for centuries the steel for the blade was forged onto iron for the bolster and tang. The join is often clearly visible as the cutlass thumbprint that can be seen in this image. Crucible steel was expensive compared to shear steel, and as it was harder and more difficult to work, was never adopted for table knives. It wasn't until the 1920s that stainless steel was adopted as a new labour-saving material for knife blades, and cheaper production methods in the 1950s led to not only the blade, but the whole knife being made of stainless steel. The materials used for knife handles were also determined by availability and cost. The majority of early knives have handles made of natural materials from animals and plants. Man-made materials used include various metals, porcelain, glass, decorative minerals such as agate and amber, and finally plastics. Materials for handles such as ivory, mother of pearl and silver were all costly but attractive and could be decorated with engraving, etching and carving. Using replacement materials like plastics and more machinery enabled manufacturers to reduce these costs. Cheaper materials like cattle bone and antler horn were usually from local sources. Bone could be boiled and pressed, and stag was often used for carving knives. More exotic materials such as ivory, buffalo horn, mother of pearl and tortoiseshell were imported, often in vast amounts. Records of the Cutlass Company show that these materials were reaching Sheffield well before the 1680s. Such materials were much more costly, so were generally reserved for better quality knives, for example fruit and dessert knives with silver blades and tortoiseshell pearl or carved ivory handles. Wood might be seen as a cheaper alternative for handles, but many used were exotic woods such as rosewood and ebony, which had to be imported. Locally available woods like beech and ash were more commonly used for tool handles rather than table knives. Some laminated woods, with trade names like Sainin wood, have also been used. Natural materials lent themselves to further embellishment. They could be shaped and carved with beautiful patterns by a skilled craftsman, like these mother-of-pearl and ivory handles. Metals are the most obvious manufactured handle material and include gold, silver, and later steel. Silver handles were at first solid, but later two hollow pieces were welded together to reduce cost. Steel could be stamped out solid with the blade and handle as one piece. Glass and porcelain were also used, as were a variety of minerals like agate. These were intended to imitate natural materials like ivory and mother-of-pearl, and as they became more sophisticated were difficult to distinguish from the actual materials themselves. The first plastics were made from celluloid in the late 1800s, like ebonite. Synthetic plastics made from oil appeared in the 1950s. Xylonite was one of the most widely used, even though it was highly flammable, making manufacture problematic. Most handles today are made from synthetic plastics. In addition to a handle, other decorative features were sometimes added to the blade and tang. Ferrules to cover the join between the handle and the blade, and caps to cover the end of the through tang known as terminals or finials. These were normally made from silver and occasionally gold. The blade for fish knives or servers, which did not need to be sharp, might also be plated with silver and etched or engraved with a pattern.